Hey class, I wanted to spend a couple minutes talking about framing and bias a little more um, because it's very important to be able to recognize framing of an issue in the American political system. When people are debating an issue, they will frame it in a way that makes their side look good or better, or they may even frame it in a way that tries to force an answer into one direction. Okay, and people can do that. We talked some about this in class, but I want to reinforce it. I may put together a homework assignment yet. I'm not entirely sure of how it would look like, where you would read an article and just talk about one or two points where the article is framed in a certain way. Which includes kind of having some type of bias or worldview, and how we could look at the same issue in a different way and how that might lead to a different answer. So here's the example I gave, or one of the examples I gave in class was, is the media liberal? That is a very common question in today's political environment. It's something that Republicans ask a lot and talk about a lot. The liberal media. Is the media liberal? Yes, it is. Whatever, blah, blah, blah. When you ask, is the media liberal, there's this implicit assumption within that question, the way you framed that question, is the media liberal, that the media cannot be conservative. That the media is either liberal or it's middle of the road. But you've excluded the option of conservative from there. Gay marriage debate going on. The question we're asking is, should gay people be allowed to marry? That's a framing issue that frames the debate around yes, gay people should be allowed to marry, and or no, gay people should not be allowed to marry. But what about quote unquote traditional marriage? Marriage between a man and a woman, or a woman and a man. Why don't we ever talk about that marriage? Should a man and a woman have the right to get married? That question never comes up, and that's part of the framing of this issue. Some people will say, if we allow gay people to get married, then we have to allow polygamy people to get married, and then of course it devolves to insanity of we have to allow men to marry little girls, and people can marry turtles, and they can marry their stapler and things like that. These are all framing issues. That do political work by putting the responsibility of justifying a position on a certain position, if that makes sense. So when we ask the question, should gay people be allowed to get married, we're putting the burden on somebody who's advocating for gay marriage. Nobody ever asked, should straight people be allowed to get married? That's just taken as an assumption, as something to be true. And you cannot mess with. And then from the, if we allow gay people to get married, all of a sudden the framing there again is, here's a special different group of people, here's something that's abnormal, that if we're going to allow them to get married, then where does it end? Do we allow men to marry little girls, polygamy, and then, like I said before. So the line for that issue, the framing for that issue has already been divided, or has already been put, that straight marriage is normalized is the undisputed way things happen in society, and if we allow something outside of the norm, then that could lead to other things about the norm. However, you could draw the line and say, or frame the issue differently and say, hey, we've allowed straight couples to get married. Why should we stop there? Why shouldn't we allow gay people to get married? I mean, if we allow straight people to get married, then it makes sense that we'd allow gay people to get married, and then it makes sense we would allow polygamists to have a polygamous marriage, and then, you know, a man marries a stapler. So that's part of framing. That's an issue of framing. A big place that you'll see this also is in public opinion polling. One of the more interesting polls that I've seen, or two different polls. One poll asks, you know, would you rather protect the environment or create more jobs? The American people, as in most things, are kind of split if you ask that question. Do you want to protect the environment or do you want to create more jobs? You get something close to a 50-50 answer. However, if you give the people, if you ask people if you can protect the environment and create jobs, the American people overwhelmingly believe that you can succeed in protecting the environment while also maintaining good economic growth and creating jobs. But by framing the environmental issue or economic issue, and you can either have environmental protection or you can have jobs, that's a framework that serves a certain political purpose, that creates this say dichotomous relationship between the environment and jobs, that this sort of hostile conflict between the environment and jobs, that one has to win out over the other and you can't do both. Whereas most Americans actually believe you can do both. But in that first poll, we framed it as if you cannot do both. We'll look at some more of these issues when we get into the last couple weeks of the semester. But it's something that you should all be looking at when you're, reading the book, listening to me, looking at news articles. How, if you read a news article, how is this person, what assumptions is this person making, and how are they framing the issue so that they can reach their favored conclusion, or it supports one side over another. I think that is it. Well, I'll just give you, I guess, this one more example. There was a editorial in the Washington Post. It was this guy like Robert Kaiser, I think his name was. It's in. It's going to be in one of the later. Oh, it might not be actually in the women's issue slide. It might be in the public opinion slide. Anyway, the point is, he states that Democrats used to be, a very southern party, but then over time I've seen the shift happen where Democrats are now just a sort of a coalition of special interest groups. And he lists the special interest groups that Democrats are. The special interest group of women, of black people, of immigrants, of trade unionists, of environmentalists, things like that. So, according to him, women are a special interest group. He's just framed women out of the picture of what is considered sort of legitimate in society, where things naturally rest. He did the same thing in that article with black people and immigrants. All of a sudden, black people are a special interest group. They're not part of the American political system. They're not a normal part of the American political system. They're not people who have legitimacy within the system because they're part of the system and they're, people and they have rights or whatever. They're a special interest group. They're off to the side. And that, my personal take on that is that's a little insulting. That you would consider large groups of people to be special interest groups based upon their gender or their race. Special interest groups would be people like environmentalists like the Sierra Club or the NRA or the American Medical Association. But black people are not a special interest group. They're a group. They're citizens. But by framing it in that way, you're normalizing white. And you're also normalizing male in that way, the way he framed it. And these other people are somehow illegitimate in the system. They don't have ownership over the system in the same way that people who are not in those special interest groups have ownership of the system. So be on the lookout for that. As I said, we'll talk about it more. I'm definitely going to try and work that into a final exam question, whether it be some sort of like critical reading of an article or a question that asks you to define it, but that's at the end of the semester, not this upcoming exam. Anyway, hope that helped. It's probably a little repetitive, but trying to explain things in different ways is sometimes helpful. So I hope somebody found it helpful. See y'all shortly.